My daughter woke up on Christmas morning and found a note taped to the tree. We needed a break from her. She ruins everything. Don't call. My mother-in-law and entire family packed their bags and went to a luxury Christmas resort without her. They left her alone with no food and no gifts, nothing. When I found out, I didn't cry. I did something they'll never forget. For days later, they came home, and the moment they saw what was on the kitchen table, they started screaming like maniacs. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. The fluorescent lights in the medical supply warehouse hummed with the kind of persistence that made your teeth ache. Tamsin Rowe had stopped noticing them hours ago. She'd learned to tune out a lot of things during her 12-hour shifts: the constant beeping of forklifts backing up, the scratch of cardboard against concrete, the cold that seeped through the loading dock doors every time they opened. Christmas morning meant double overtime. It meant silence in the break room and turkey sandwiches from the vending machine that tasted like plastic and regret. But it also meant an extra paycheck that could cover Elsie's spring activities, maybe even that science camp she'd been circling in the flyer with a purple marker. Tamsin was scanning boxes of surgical masks when her phone vibrated against her hip. She ignored it. 3 more pallets to process before her break. The warehouse manager, Phil, was walking the floor today, rare for a holiday, and she wasn't about to give him a reason to dock her hours. The phone buzzed again, then again. Tamsin set down the scanner and pulled the phone from her pocket. Her hands were dry from the warehouse air, knuckles starting to crack despite the lotion she kept in her locker. The screen showed 3 missed calls, all from Gwen Holloway. Gwen lived 2 doors down from Maribel's house. They'd spoken maybe a dozen times in 5 years, quick hellos in the grocery store parking lot, a wave across driveways. Gwen wasn't the type to call. She wasn't the type to call 3 times on Christmas morning. Tamsin's thumb hovered over the callback button. Her chest felt tight, but not panicked. Not yet. There was a space between knowing something was wrong and knowing what that something was. She existed in that space for exactly 4 seconds. Then she pressed call. Gwen answered on the first ring. Her voice came through thin and careful, the way people sound when they're trying not to alarm you, but can't quite hide their own worry. Tamsin, I'm sorry to bother you on Christmas. What happened? Tamsin kept her voice level. Around her, the warehouse continued its mechanical rhythm. Beeps, scrapes, the distant clang of metal on metal. Your little girl came to my door last night. Gwen paused. Tamsin could hear her breathing, could picture her standing in her kitchen with its yellow curtains and the ceramic rooster collection on the windowsill. She was knocking on doors, said nobody was home at the house. The words landed like facts. Clean, simple, undeniable. What time? Tamsin asked. Around 8, maybe a little after. Gwen's voice caught. She was in her pajamas, just those thin ones with the snowflakes. No coat. Tamsin closed her eyes. 8 o'clock. That would have been an hour after Maribel promised to have Elsie fed and ready for bed. An hour after Tamsin had texted to check in and received a thumbs-up emoji in response. Where is she now? I kept her overnight. Put her in my guest room. She didn't want to talk much. Just said she got locked out. I tried calling you earlier, but I'm at work. Tamsin opened her eyes. The warehouse looked exactly the same as it had 30 seconds ago. Nothing had changed except everything. Is she okay? She seems okay. Quiet. She ate some toast this morning. I'm coming right now. Tamsin, should I call someone? Child services or... No. The word came out harder than she intended. Not yet. I need to see what happened first. She ended the call before Gwen could argue. Phil appeared at the end of the aisle, clipboard in hand, expression halfway between annoyed and curious. He was a decent manager by warehouse standards, didn't yell, didn't play favorites, showed up on time. But decent didn't mean understanding. Ro, you got 3 more. Family emergency. I have to go. It's Christmas. We're short-staffed as it is. Tamsin pulled off her safety vest and hung it on the rack by the time clock. Her hands moved on autopilot. Punch out. Grab her coat from her locker. Find her keys in the pocket where she always kept them. Ro, if you leave now, I can't guarantee these hours will. I don't care about the hours. She walked past him without looking back. The warehouse door slammed behind her, and the December air hit her face like a slap. Cold, sharp, clarifying. The parking lot stretched out under a sky the color of old dishwater. A few cars remained scattered across the asphalt. The skeleton crew, the people who had nowhere else to be or needed the money more than they needed the holiday. Tamsin's car, a 14-year-old Honda with a crack in the windshield and a passenger door that stuck, sat in its usual spot near the back fence. She got in, started the engine, waited for the heat to kick in, even though she knew it would take 10 minutes of driving before warm air would actually blow through the vents. Her phone sat in the cup holder, screen dark. No other calls. No texts. Maribel's number showed nothing new. Neither did Evan's. Tamsin put the car in drive and pulled out of the parking lot. Maple Crossing looked like a postcard on Christmas morning. The kind of small Ohio town that people wrote songs about or used as movie backdrops. Main Street had brick buildings from the 1920s, a diner that served breakfast all day, a pharmacy with an old-fashioned striped awning. Someone had wrapped garland around the streetlights. Every other house had a wreath on the door. Tamsin drove past all of it. She knew these streets the way you know anything you've lived with too long. Every pothole, every stop sign, every place where the yellow line had faded to almost nothing. Left on Birch, right on Sycamore, straight through the intersection where the traffic light blinked yellow because the town council refused to pay for a full signal. Maribel's house sat at the end of Oakmont Drive, a ranch style from the 70s with vinyl siding that used to be white but had aged to the color of old teeth. A maple tree dominated the front yard, bare branches reaching up like skeletal fingers. The driveway sat empty. Tamsin parked on the street, sat in the car with the engine running, stared at the house where her daughter was supposed to have spent Christmas Eve, warm and safe and celebrated. The garage door was closed. No lights on inside that she could see. The grass needed cutting, even in winter, shaggy around the edges, overgrown near the foundation. She turned off the engine. The silence felt deliberate, like the house was holding its breath. Tamsin got out. Her boots crunched on the gravel driveway. Frost had painted patterns on the neighbors' car windows, delicate and temporary. Smoke rose from the chimney 3 houses down. Somewhere a dog barked twice and went quiet. The front door was locked. Tamsin used her key, the one Evan had insisted she keep, back when they first separated, back when he still pretended they might work things out. The lock turned with a soft click. Inside, the house smelled wrong. Not bad, just wrong. Stale air and old coffee, and something underneath it all. Something chemical and sharp. Cleaning products, maybe. Or air freshener sprayed too liberally to cover up neglect. Elsie. Tamsin's voice filled the empty rooms and died there. She moved through the living room. The Christmas tree stood in the corner. Artificial, pre-lit, the kind that came in a box from a discount store. Presents sat underneath, wrapped in mismatched paper. Tamsin recognized the red and green snowman print. She'd bought that roll last year. On the coffee table, 2 empty wine glasses, a magazine open to a crossword puzzle, the remote control. In the kitchen, dishes in the sink, crusty with food residue, a frying pan on the stove with congealed grease, the trash can overflowing with takeout containers and beer bottles. The refrigerator hummed. Tamsin opened it. Half a bottle of ketchup, 2 expired yogurt cups, a jar of pickles with 3 pickles left. She closed the refrigerator door. The magnet with Elsie's school photo from 2 years ago when she still had her front teeth, stared back at her. 9 years old in that picture. 11 now. Growing up in a house that couldn't even keep food stocked for Christmas. The hallway led to 3 bedrooms. Maribel's door stood open. Bed unmade, clothes draped over a chair, pill bottles lined up on the nightstand. Tamsin didn't go in. The bathroom showed similar neglect. Toothpaste dried in the sink, towels on the floor. Elsie's room, the guest room, really converted into a temporary space for visits, was at the end of the hall. The door was closed. Tamsin opened it. The bed was made. Hospital corners, the way Maribel insisted things should be done. Elsie's small duffel bag sat on the floor, still packed. Her coat hung on the back of the door, pink with a fake fur collar, the one Tamsin had bought her in September because the old one had gotten too small. On the nightstand, Elsie's stuffed rabbit, the one she'd had since she was 3. Its ears were floppy and one eye was loose, but she took it everywhere. She would never have left it behind. Not willingly. Tamsin walked back to the living room. The Christmas tree lights blinked in sequence. Red, green, blue, yellow, repeat. Methodical. Indifferent. She saw it then. Taped to one of the plastic branches. Folded once. A piece of notebook paper. Tamsin's hands didn't shake when she peeled off the tape. They didn't shake when she unfolded the note. They didn't shake when she read the words written in Maribel's perfect cursive. Each letter formed with the kind of precision that came from decades of writing grocery lists and thank you cards and birthday invitations. We needed a break from her. She ruins everything. Don't call. Tamsin read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. She folded the note along its original crease. Put it in her coat pocket. The paper crinkled slightly against the fabric, a sound so small it shouldn't have mattered. She didn't cry. Crying would come later, maybe, or maybe it wouldn't come at all. Right now she needed to think, to understand, to plan. Maribel had left. That much was obvious. She'd taken a car, probably Evan's, since hers was in the shop more often than not. She'd locked the door behind her. She'd left a child alone in an empty house on Christmas Eve with no food, no supervision, no way to contact anyone. And she'd left a note that made it clear this wasn't an accident. Tamsin walked through the house one more time, slower now, cataloging details. A suitcase missing from Maribel's closet. Makeup gone from the bathroom counter. The good winter coat absent from the front hall closet. This was planned. This was deliberate. This was a choice. Tamsin locked the front door behind her and walked back to her car. The cold had intensified, or maybe she just noticed it more now. Her breath made small clouds in the air. The sun had climbed higher but gave no warmth, just flat white light that made everything look washed out and stark. She sat in the driver's seat, pulled out her phone, found Evan's number in her contacts, still saved under Evan Rowe, not ex or husband, or any of the other labels she'd considered. Just his name. Simple. Factual. The call rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, he answered. Yeah. His voice sounded rough, tired, the way he sounded when he'd been up too late watching television or drinking with his brothers. Background noise filtered through. Voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. He was somewhere social, somewhere festive. Where's your mother? Tamsin kept her voice neutral. Gave him nothing to react to yet. Merry Christmas to you too. Evan. Where is she? A pause. The background noise dimmed slightly, like he'd moved to a different room. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted into defensive territory, the place he always went when he knew something was wrong, but didn't want to admit it. She went to stay with Aunt Deb for a few days. Needed some space. Why? And Elsie. What about her? Mom said she'd drop her off at your place before she left. She didn't. Another pause. Longer this time. Tamsin could hear him breathing. Could imagine him standing there in someone's kitchen or living room, trying to process information that didn't fit his carefully constructed narrative. What do you mean she didn't? I mean your mother left Elsie alone in that house. All night. On Christmas Eve. That's no. No, she wouldn't do that. Mom said you were coming to get her early anyway. She probably just... She locked the door, Evan. Tamsin's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. The facts were enough. She left a note. She packed a bag and drove away and left our daughter in an empty house with no food and no way to get help. You're exaggerating. You always do this. You take something small and blow it completely out of. Elsie knocked on the neighbors' doors in her pajamas because she was locked out. On Christmas Eve, in 30-degree weather. Silence, the kind that stretched and twisted until it became its own response. Then, you're making this up. Tamsin's hand tightened on the phone. Made herself breathe. Made herself stay calm because anger right now would be counterproductive and she needed him to hear this. Really hear this, without his defenses going up any higher than they already were. I'm at your mother's house right now, she said. The fridge is empty. Elsie's coat is still here. Her bag is still packed. There's a note taped to the Christmas tree that says, and I'm quoting, we needed a break from her. She ruins everything. Don't call. Let me see it. What? The note. Let me see it. Take a picture. Tamsin closed her eyes. Of course, he needed proof. Of course his first instinct was to doubt her, to protect his mother, to find some way to make this not be what it so clearly was. She pulled the note from her pocket, photographed it with her phone, sent it without comment. She heard the notification chime on his end, heard the silence that followed. This is... His voice had changed. Smaller now. Uncertain. This is her handwriting. Yes. She wouldn't just, she's not, Tamsin. There has to be an explanation. Maybe she thought you were coming. Maybe she got confused about the timing. She wasn't confused. She made a choice. No, listen, my mom raised 3 kids. She knows how to take care of children. There's obviously some kind of miscommunication here, and you're jumping to the worst possible. Where is Elsie supposed to sleep tonight, Evan? What? There's no food in the house. Your mother is gone. You're wherever you are doing whatever you're doing. So I'm asking you, where is our daughter supposed to sleep tonight? He didn't answer immediately. Tamsin could hear him processing, could almost see the expression on his face, that look he got when reality didn't match his expectations, when the story he'd told himself started to crumble. She's with you, he said finally. Obviously. You went and got her. I'm still at your mother's house. Elsie spent the night with Gwen Holloway because a neighbor is more responsible than your family. That's not, you're being unfair. My mom has her issues, but she's not some kind of monster. She probably just needed a break. Kids can be exhausting, especially during the holidays, and Elsie can be a lot to handle sometimes. Stop. The word came out harder than she intended. Sharper. She made herself pull back, made herself remember that she needed him to understand, not just to fight. Evan, listen to me. Your mother abandoned our daughter. That's not an opinion. That's what happened. She left an 11-year-old alone in an empty house overnight. That's not needing a break. That's not being overwhelmed. That's criminal negligence. Oh, here we go. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting for some excuse to... To what? To protect our child? Yes, I've been waiting for that. I wait for that every single day. You're overreacting. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, my daughter, our daughter, spent Christmas Eve knocking on strangers' doors for help. That seems like an appropriate reaction to me. My mother is not a stranger, and she didn't abandon anyone. She made a mistake, maybe. Got her timing wrong. But this is you doing what you always do, making everything into some huge drama because you never liked her anyway. You've had it out for her since. Tamsin ended the call. Her hand was shaking now, just slightly, just enough to make the phone feel heavier than it should. She sat in the cold car and stared at the empty house where her daughter had been abandoned and tried to remember when exactly she'd realized her marriage was over. Was it this morning? Was it the moment she read that note? Or was it years ago, the first time Evan had chosen his mother's feelings over their daughter's safety? The phone rang. Evan calling back. She declined it. He called again. She declined it again. A text came through. You're being dramatic. We need to talk about this like adults. She didn't respond. Another text. You can't just shut down communication. That's not how marriage works. She turned off her phone. The neighborhood was waking up now. A car pulled out of a driveway 3 houses down. A man walked his dog past her car, nodded politely, kept moving. Christmas morning in Maple Crossing, where everything looked normal from the outside. Where people kept their problems behind closed doors and their scandals quiet and their damaged children hidden away until someone like Gwen Holloway noticed and made a phone call. Tamsin started the car, pulled away from the curb, drove back toward Gwen's house, which was only 6 blocks away but felt like a different world entirely. Gwen's place had lights in the windows, a wreath on the door, a small nativity scene in the front yard. She parked, walked up the driveway, knocked. Gwen answered immediately, like she'd been waiting by the door. She was in her 60s, short and sturdy, with gray hair cut practically short and eyes that missed nothing. Is she here? Tamsin asked. In the kitchen. She's been drawing. Tamsin stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee and pine. Real Christmas tree smell, not the artificial kind. Everything was warm. Everything was safe. Elsie sat at the kitchen table with a box of crayons and a stack of printer paper. She was drawing a cat, or maybe a dog. Her tongue stuck out slightly when she concentrated, the way it had since she was tiny. She looked up when Tamsin entered. Her face didn't change. No smile, no relief, just acknowledgement. Hi, Mom. Hi, baby. Tamsin sat down across from her. Gwen disappeared into the living room with the kind of tact that came from raising 5 children of her own. I heard you had an adventure last night, Tamsin said carefully. Elsie went back to her drawing, added a tail in purple crayon. It wasn't really an adventure. What was it then? Just regular, normal. Nothing about this was normal. But Tamsin didn't say that. She waited. Silence was sometimes better than questions. After a minute, Elsie spoke again. Grandma said she needed quiet time. She said Christmas is better without noise. When did she say that? After dinner. We had chicken nuggets. Elsie switched to green crayon, started coloring grass. Then she said she was going out for a little while. She told me to stay in my room. And then it got late. I came out because I was thirsty, but she wasn't there. Elsie's hand moved steadily across the paper. The grass looked like grass. She was good at drawing. Tamsin had forgotten that. I tried the door, but it was locked. The back door, too. What did you do? I waited for a while. I thought maybe she went to the store. But then it got really dark, and I got cold because the heat turned off. So I went to the bathroom window. It's small, but I fit through. Tamsin's chest hurt. Not the sharp pain of injury. The dull ache of understanding something you didn't want to understand. You climbed out the bathroom window. It wasn't that high. Just a little drop. Elsie looked up, defensive now. I didn't break anything. I'm not mad about the window, sweetheart. I need to know what happened next. I knocked on some doors. Most people didn't answer. Then Mrs. Holloway did. She gave me hot chocolate. With marshmallows, Gwen called from the living room. Elsie almost smiled. Almost. Yeah, the little ones. Tamsin reached across the table, touched her daughter's hand. I'm so sorry. It's okay. No, it's not. Elsie pulled her hand back, picked up a red crayon. Grandma left me a note. She said you'd come get me in the morning. She said I was supposed to wait. She left you alone all night. Yeah. Elsie added flowers to the grass. Small ones. Careful. But I figured it out. You shouldn't have had to figure it out. I know. They sat in silence. The kitchen clock ticked. Somewhere in the house, Gwen moved quietly through her Christmas morning routine. The smell of cinnamon rolls baking began to fill the air. Can we go home now? Elsie asked. Yes, let's go home. They drove back to the apartment in silence. Elsie sat in the passenger seat with her drawing folded carefully in her lap. She'd refused to leave it behind. Tamsin didn't push. Let her keep whatever small thing brought comfort. The apartment was on the second floor of a converted house on the east side of town. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that barely fit a table. But it was theirs. Tamsin had signed the lease 8 months ago, after the separation became official, after it became clear that living under the same roof as Evan meant choosing between her daughter's well-being and his mother's approval. She'd chosen Elsie. Every time, without question, but weekends and holidays still belonged to his family. The custody arrangement, mediated and signed and legally binding, gave Evan alternating weekends and major holidays. Christmas Eve through Christmas Day, Thanksgiving, Easter. Tamsin had agreed because she thought fathers mattered. Because she thought Evan, despite his flaws, loved his daughter. Because she thought Maribel, despite her coldness, would at least keep a child safe. She'd been wrong. They climbed the stairs to the apartment. The building was quiet, most of the other tenants gone for the holiday, visiting family, or away on trips. Their footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Inside, the apartment felt empty but not lonely. Tamsin had tried to make it homey. Second-hand furniture arranged carefully, curtains that matched the throw pillows, photos on the walls. A small Christmas tree sat in the corner of the living room, decorated with ornaments Elsie had made in elementary school. Nothing expensive, nothing fancy, but warm. "Are you hungry?" Tamsin asked. Elsie shook her head. "Mrs. Holloway made me eggs." "Okay. Do you want to rest? Watch TV." "I'll just go to my room." She disappeared down the short hallway. Her door closed with a soft click. Tamsin stood in the living room and looked at her phone. She'd turned it back on during the drive. 17 missed calls from Evan. 8 text messages, escalating from defensive to angry to worried to demanding. She scrolled through without reading most of them. The last one said, "We need to talk. Call me." She didn't call. Instead, she sat on the couch and pulled out the note, unfolded it, looked at Maribel's handwriting again. We needed a break from her. She ruins everything. Don't call. The words were clear, unambiguous, no room for interpretation. She thought about that word, we. Not I. We. Who is we? Maribel and Aunt Deb? Maribel and Evan? Maribel and the entire Rowe family clan, all of them complicit in deciding an 11-year-old was too much trouble, too much noise, too much existence. Tamsin's hands clenched around the paper, made herself put it down before she crumpled it. She'd need it intact. Evidence mattered. Documentation mattered. She took a photo of it with her phone, saved it to 3 different folders, sent it to her email, made sure it couldn't be lost or destroyed or dismissed later as a misunderstanding. Then she called her lawyer. Patricia Kim answered on the 3rd ring, sounding surprised. They'd worked together during the divorce proceedings. A clean enough split as divorces went. Custody shared but not equal. Tamsin had primary placement, but Evan got his weekends and holidays. Patricia had argued for more protection, more stipulations, but Tamsin had been trying to be fair. "Tamsin, is everything okay?" "No." She told the story, cleanly. No emotion. Just facts. The locked house. The empty fridge. The note. Elsie climbing through a bathroom window. A neighbor taking her in. Patricia listened without interrupting. When Tamsin finished, there was a long pause. "Do you still have the note?" Patricia asked. "Yes, and I photographed it. The house, too." Good. That's good. Where is Elsie now? Home with me. Safe. Has Evan responded to any of this? He thinks I'm overreacting. He's defending his mother. Of course he is. Patricia's voice carried the weariness of someone who'd seen this pattern before. Listen to me carefully. Do not let Elsie go back to that house. Do not agree to any visits with Maribel. If Evan pushes back, tell him everything goes through me. I already decided that. I'm going to file an emergency motion first thing after Christmas. We'll go for sole custody based on documented neglect and endangerment. With that note and witness testimony from the neighbor, we have a strong case. What about Evan? What about him? He wasn't there. He didn't know what his mother was doing. He's defending her now. That's what matters. He's choosing to protect the person who endangered your daughter. That shows where his priorities are. Tamsin closed her eyes. I don't want to keep him from Elsie. I just want her safe. Those might not be compatible goals anymore. The truth of that settled heavy in her stomach. She'd known it on some level for a while now, but hearing it said aloud made it real. Okay, she said quietly. One more thing. You need to report this. Call Child Protective Services. Make an official report. I don't want to traumatize Elsie further. I understand. But if you don't report it and Evan finds out and reports it his way, painting you as overreacting or interfering, it could hurt your case. You need to control the narrative. Tamsin hated that word. Narrative. Like her daughter's safety was a story to be told. Shaped, manipulated. But Patricia was right. I'll call them. Today. Before word gets back to Evan that you're taking action. He'll try to spin this. Don't give him time. They hung up. Tamsin sat on the couch and stared at her phone and thought about how quickly everything could change. Yesterday morning, she'd been worried about overtime hours and whether Elsie would like the gift she'd hidden in her closet. Now she was preparing to file reports and fight for custody and possibly send her daughter's grandmother to jail. No, not possibly. Definitely. Because this wasn't just negligence. This wasn't just poor judgment. This was intentional abandonment. This was a woman who looked at a child and decided she was too much trouble, too inconvenient, too loud, and then wrote it down, made it permanent, made it evidence. Tamsin called the County Child Protective Services hotline, spoke to an intake worker named James who had the kind voice of someone who'd heard worse stories than this, but still cared. She told him everything. He took notes, asked clarifying questions, promised someone would follow up within 24 hours. Is the child in immediate danger? He asked. No. She's with me now. She's safe. And you don't plan to allow contact with the grandmother? Not unsupervised. Not until this is resolved. That's wise. He paused. For what it's worth, you did the right thing calling us. Tamsin didn't feel like she'd done the right thing. She felt like she'd pulled a pin on a grenade and was waiting for the explosion. But she thanked him anyway and ended the call. It was only noon. Christmas Day. The afternoon stretched ahead like an obstacle course. Tamsin checked on Elsie, found her lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The drawing sat on her nightstand. The stuffed rabbit, retrieved from Maribel's house before they left, was tucked under her arm. Hey, Tamsin said softly from the doorway. Elsie didn't move. Hey, you okay? Just tired. Okay, I'll be in the living room if you need me. Mom. Yeah. Are you mad at Grandma? Tamsin considered how to answer, considered lying, softening it, protecting Elsie from the full weight of adult anger and disappointment. But children deserved honesty. They could handle more truth than people gave them credit for. Yes, she said. I'm very mad at her. Elsie nodded, didn't ask anything else, closed her eyes. Tamsin left the door cracked open and went back to the living room, sat on the couch, put her head in her hands. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended state. Tamsin called off work for the rest of the week. Elsie stayed close to home, quieter than usual but not broken. They watched movies, made grilled cheese sandwiches, played card games at the kitchen table. Evan called 6 more times. She didn't answer. He texted accusations and demands and eventually threats. She screenshot them all, sent them to Patricia. On December 27th, a CPS worker named Denise arrived at the apartment. She was in her 40s, professional but kind, with a notebook and careful eyes. She interviewed Elsie separately than Tamsin, asked to see the note, took photos, asked about Maribel's history, Evan's involvement, Tamsin's concerns. Has anything like this happened before? Denise asked. Tamsin thought about that, about the times Elsie had come home from visits quieter than she should be, about the comments Maribel made. She's so dramatic, she never stops talking, some children are easier than others. About the way Evan brushed off concerns with "that's just how Mom is." Nothing this extreme, Tamsin said, but small things, comments, impatience. I thought it was just her personality. I didn't realize it would escalate to this. Most people don't, Denise said, until it does. She took more notes, explained the process, investigation, interviews with family members, potential charges if warranted, asked if Tamsin felt safe, if Elsie felt safe, if there was any concern about retaliation. Evan's family is... Tamsin searched for the right word. Protective of each other. They close ranks. Will they try to contact Elsie? Evan might. His mother. I don't know. I don't think she sees what she did as wrong. Denise nodded like this wasn't surprising. We'll be in touch. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. Any attempted contact, any statements from family members, any changes in Elsie's behavior. I will. You're doing the right thing, Denise said. I know it doesn't feel that way, but protecting your child, even from family, is always the right thing. After she left, Tamsin sat at the kitchen table and made a list. Everything she could remember. Every comment, every incident, every red flag she'd ignored or explained away. Filled 3 pages, dated and signed it. Evidence. That night, Evan showed up at the apartment. Tamsin heard him coming up the stairs before he knocked. Heavy footsteps, frustrated and loud. She'd been expecting this. Was actually surprised it had taken this long. She didn't open the door. Tamsin, open the door. His voice was controlled. Barely. No. We need to talk about this. Face to face. We can talk through the door. That's ridiculous. Your mother abandoned our daughter. Talking through a door seems reasonable by comparison. A pause. She heard him breathing on the other side. Heard him shift his weight. You called CPS on my mother. I reported what happened. Yes. Do you know what you've done? Do you have any idea the kind of trouble this causes? For who? For Elsie? She's fine. She's safe. For your mother? She should be in trouble. She made a mistake. She left a child alone overnight on Christmas Eve. That's not a mistake. That's a crime. You're being vindictive. You never liked her, and now you're using this as an excuse to... To what, Evan? To protect our daughter? Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. She's my daughter, too. Then act like it. Tamsin's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. Act like you care more about her safety than your mother's feelings. Act like you understand that what happened was wrong. I do understand that, but calling the authorities, making this official, you've escalated this into something it didn't need to be. It needed to be exactly this. It needed to be documented and investigated because your mother is dangerous. She's not dangerous. She's tired. She's getting older. She has trouble sometimes managing things, but that doesn't make her. Stop. Tamsin pressed her palm against the door. Stop defending her. I can't listen to it anymore. Then what do you want from me? I want you to choose your daughter. Just once. Choose her over your mother. over your family, over whatever story you've told yourself about how this is somehow okay or understandable or forgivable. Silence, long enough that Tamsin thought maybe he'd left. Then, I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you're not. She heard him leave, heavy footsteps down the stairs, the front door of the building closing hard enough to shake the frame. Elsie appeared in the hallway. She'd been listening. Of course she had. Is Dad mad? She asked. Yes. At me? Tamsin crossed the room in 3 steps, knelt down, took her daughter's face in both hands. No, never at you. None of this is your fault. Do you understand that? Elsie's eyes were wet, but no tears fell. Grandma said I was too much. She said that a lot. She was wrong. But what if? No, listen to me. You're not too much. You're not too loud or too dramatic or too anything. You are exactly right. And anyone who makes you feel otherwise is wrong. That includes your grandmother. That includes your father if he tries to make excuses for her. They are wrong. Elsie nodded. Tamsin pulled her into a hug, held on tight, made a silent promise that she would never, ever let anyone make her daughter feel small again. The investigation moved forward. Gwen gave a statement. The neighbors who'd turned Elsie away gave statements, awkward, ashamed but honest. Maribel was located at her sister's house in Columbus. She gave a statement too. According to Patricia, who got the details from her contact at CPS, Maribel showed no remorse, said she needed peace, said children were exhausting, said Tamsin was a dramatic person who blew things out of proportion. The note, she claimed, was taken out of context. There's no context, Tamsin said when Patricia told her. It says she needed a break from an 11-year-old and that the 11-year-old ruins everything. What context makes that acceptable? None, Patricia agreed, which is why the prosecutor is filing charges. What kind of charges? Child endangerment, abandonment of a dependent, possibly more depending on what else comes out during the investigation. Will there be a trial? Maybe. Depends if she takes a plea deal. Will Elsie have to testify? Possibly. If it goes to trial. Tamsin closed her eyes. I don't want to put her through that. I know, but sometimes protecting our children means making them face hard things. You'll be with her. I'll be with her. And she's stronger than you think. Tamsin knew that, had seen that strength when Elsie climbed through a bathroom window and knocked on doors until someone helped her. Had seen it in the way she drew pictures and stayed quiet and didn't fall apart even when the adults around her were chaos and failure. Okay, she said. If it comes to that, okay. Patricia filed the emergency motion for sole custody on December 30th. Evan was served with papers the same day. He called immediately. You're taking her away from me, completely? That's what you want. Tamsin stood in her kitchen and looked out the window at the gray winter afternoon. I want you to prove you can put her first. Show me you understand what your mother did was wrong. Show me you won't let it happen again. I won't, I promise. But taking away my custody rights. I'm not taking them away. I'm asking for sole custody with supervised visitation. You can still see her. You just can't leave her with your mother anymore. That's the same thing. No, it's protecting our daughter. I can protect her. You didn't. The words hung there. Simple. Devastating. True. That's not fair, he said quietly. Fair would be Elsie spending Christmas with family who actually wanted her there. Fair would be you standing up to your mother when she called our daughter too much trouble. Fair would be you choosing her over your family's convenience. I'm trying. Try harder. She hung up. January arrived cold and indifferent. The court hearing for emergency custody was scheduled for January 14th. Tamsin prepared, gathered documentation, made lists, practiced what she'd say. Elsie went back to school. Tamsin watched for signs of trauma, nightmares, anxiety, behavioral changes. Saw some, addressed them, found a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma, made appointments. Evan requested a visitation at a neutral location, the public library downtown. Patricia approved it, supervised by a social worker named Keith, who looked like someone's uncle and had infinite patience. Tamsin brought Elsie, stayed in the building, but not in the same room. Let them have time together. Picked her up after 2 hours. "How was it?" she asked on the drive home. "Okay." Elsie looked out the window. He asked if I was mad at him. "What did you say?" I said I don't know. Because I don't. That's honest. He said Grandma didn't mean to hurt me. He said she was just overwhelmed. Tamsin gripped the steering wheel tighter, made her voice stay calm. "What do you think about that?" "I think if you're overwhelmed, you ask for help. You don't just leave." 11 years old, already understanding what grown adults couldn't seem to grasp. "That's exactly right," Tamsin said. The courthouse in downtown Maple Crossing looked like every courthouse in every small town. Brick exterior, marble steps, American flag snapping in the January wind. Tamsin had been here before, for the divorce, but it felt different now. Higher stakes, more permanent. She arrived early with Patricia. They sat on a bench outside the courtroom and went over the case one more time. "The judge is Rebecca Morrison," Patricia said, keeping her voice low even though the hallway was nearly empty. "She's fair. Strict about evidence, but fair. She doesn't tolerate manipulation or emotional appeals without substance." "Good. Evan will have his lawyer. They'll argue that this was an isolated incident, that Maribel made a mistake, that limiting custody punishes him for something his mother did." "How do we counter that?" "By showing a pattern. By demonstrating that he chose to defend her actions rather than protect Elsie. By proving that unsupervised access to his family poses an ongoing risk." Tamsin nodded. She'd heard this before. It still felt surreal, talking about her daughter like a legal problem to be solved, reducing trauma and fear down to evidence and testimony. Evan arrived 15 minutes later with his lawyer, a man named Robert Chin, who specialized in family law and had a reputation for aggressive defense. They didn't make eye contact. Robert nodded professionally at Patricia. They disappeared into the courtroom to speak with the judge privately. At 9 a.m. they were called in. The courtroom was smaller than Tamsin expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a judge's bench that somehow looked both imposing and mundane. Judge Morrison sat reviewing papers, gray-haired and expressionless. A court reporter sat ready. A bailiff stood by the door. Tamsin took her seat at the plaintiff's table. Evan sat across the aisle at the defendant's table. She could feel him looking at her. Didn't look back. "This is case number 2025 FC 0142, Judge Morrison said without preamble. "Emergency motion for sole custody with supervised visitation. Ms. Kim, you're representing the mother." Patricia stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Chin, you're representing the father?" Robert Chin stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. Ms. Kim, this is your motion. Present your case." Patricia approached the bench with a folder of documents. "Your Honor, this case involves documented child endangerment by the paternal grandmother, Maribel Rowe, during a court-ordered custodial visit on Christmas Eve. We have substantial evidence that the child, Elsie Rowe, age 11, was intentionally abandoned overnight in an unsupervised residence with no food, no means of communication, and no adult present." She submitted the note. Photographs of the empty house, the neighbor's statement, the CPS report. Judge Morrison reviewed each document in silence. Her expression gave nothing away. "Ms. Kim, what is your client's concern regarding continued custody arrangements?" "Your Honor, the father, Evan Rowe, has demonstrated that he prioritizes defending his mother's actions over ensuring his daughter's safety. Despite clear evidence of endangerment. He has minimized the incident, characterized it as a misunderstanding, and expressed reluctance to accept responsibility or implement protective measures. Mr. Chen, your response. Robert Chen stood. He had the bearing of someone who'd done this many times before. Calm, professional, slightly condescending. Your Honor, this was a regrettable incident, but an isolated one. Mrs. Maribel Rowe is currently facing criminal charges and will be held accountable through that process. However, my client, Mr. Evan Rowe, was not present during the incident, had no knowledge it was occurring, and cannot reasonably be held responsible for his mother's independent actions. But he is responsible for where he places his daughter, Judge Morrison said. It wasn't a question. He placed her with family, Your Honor, a grandmother who had successfully cared for her during previous visits. There was no indication this would occur, except that it did occur. Robert Chen's jaw tightened slightly. Yes, Your Honor, and my client has expressed willingness to ensure it does not happen again. He has agreed to no unsupervised contact between his mother and the child. He has agreed to participate in co-parenting counseling. He is committed to his daughter's well-being. Ms. Kim, do you dispute that Mr. Rowe has offered these accommodations? Patricia stood. Your Honor, we dispute that these accommodations are sufficient. Mr. Rowe's initial response to this incident was to defend his mother and accuse my client of overreacting. He characterized a note that explicitly stated, "She ruins everything," as taken out of context. He prioritized protecting his mother's reputation over acknowledging his daughter's trauma. That demonstrates a judgment failure that poses ongoing risk. Your Honor, Robert interjected, parents in crisis often react imperfectly. My client was shocked, defensive, trying to process difficult information about his mother. His initial reaction does not define his capacity as a parent. Judge Morrison held up a hand. Mr. Chen, I'll hear from your client directly. Mr. Rowe, please approach. Evan stood, walked to the witness area. He looked nervous. Tamsin saw him glance at her once, quickly, before focusing on the judge. Mr. Rowe, tell me what happened when you learned your daughter had been left alone. Evan swallowed. I was at my brother's house. My ex-wife called. She was upset. She told me my mother had left Elsie alone, which I didn't believe at first because my mother has always been responsible with the kids. But when she sent me the note, when I saw my mother's handwriting, I realized something had gone very wrong. What did you do? I tried to understand what happened. I thought maybe there was a miscommunication. Maybe my mother thought Tamsin was coming earlier. Did you consider your daughter's safety in that moment? Of course, but I also know my mother. She's not a danger. She made a terrible mistake, but she's not. She wouldn't intentionally hurt Elsie. Mr. Rowe, your mother wrote that your daughter ruins everything. Does that sound like someone who cares about her well-being? Evan's face flushed. She was frustrated. That doesn't mean. It means she viewed an 11-year-old child as a burden. It means she chose her own convenience over a child's safety. Do you understand that? Yes, I understand that now. Do you understand that defending those actions, minimizing them, explaining them away, makes your former wife question whether you can protect your daughter from similar situations in the future? Evan looked at Tamsin then, really looked at her. She saw something in his expression, recognition maybe. Shame. I understand, he said quietly. If I allow continued shared custody, can you guarantee your daughter will never be left alone with your mother again? Yes. Can you guarantee your family will not pressure you to forgive this incident? To bring your daughter around your mother for holidays or family gatherings? Evan hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Mr. Rowe, my family they're upset. They think this is being blown out of proportion. They think Tamsin is being vindictive. They want me to fight for my rights. And what do you want? I want my daughter to be safe. I want to be part of her life. But I also don't want to lose my whole family over this. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair. Mr. Rowe, here is what I'm hearing. You understand your mother's actions were wrong. You want your daughter safe. But you are unwilling to set clear boundaries with your family because it would cost you their approval. Is that accurate? Evan stopped, started again. I don't know how to choose between them. That's the problem, the judge said. When it comes to your child's safety, there should be no choice. Your daughter comes first. Always. Non-negotiably. The fact that you're struggling with that tells me you're not ready for unsupervised custody. Your Honor, I'm not finished. Your mother is facing criminal charges. That process will play out separately. But in this courtroom, we're determining what's best for this child. And what's best is a parent who doesn't hesitate, who doesn't equivocate, who puts her first without question. The courtroom was silent. Tamsin could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the court reporter's fingers on the keys. Ms. Kim, Judge Morrison said, I'm granting your motion for sole legal and physical custody. Mr. Rowe will have supervised visitation, 2 hours per week, to be conducted at a neutral location with an approved supervisor present. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months. Patricia inclined her head. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Chin, I strongly encourage your client to participate in parenting classes and family therapy. If he can demonstrate improved judgment and clear boundaries with his extended family, we can revisit custody arrangements at the next hearing. Yes, Your Honor, Robert said, but his tone suggested defeat. One more thing. Judge Morrison looked directly at Evan. Mr. Rowe, I don't doubt you love your daughter, but love without wisdom is dangerous. Love without boundaries is enabling. Your mother harmed your child. Your job now is to accept that fully, without excuse, without minimization. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down once. Final. They filed out of the courtroom in silence. Evan and his lawyer disappeared down one corridor. Tamsin and Patricia walked toward the exit. You okay? Patricia asked. I'm fine. You did the right thing. I know. But it didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary. There was a difference. Outside, the January wind bit through Tamsin's coat. She stood on the courthouse steps and watched people moving through their ordinary days. A mother with a stroller, an elderly couple holding hands, a delivery driver checking an address. Normal life, continuing, while hers had just fundamentally shifted. Her phone buzzed. A text from Evan, can we talk? She considered it, considered ignoring it, considered all the ways this conversation could go wrong. Then she called him. He answered immediately. Tamsin, what do you want to talk about? His voice cracked slightly. I don't know. That was hard to hear. What the judge said. It was true. I know. That's what makes it hard. Tamsin walked toward her car. The parking lot was half empty. Salt stains marked the asphalt. Evan, I don't want to keep you from Elsie. That was never the goal. But you don't trust me with her. I don't trust your judgment right now. There's a difference. How do I fix that? She stopped walking, turned to face the courthouse, its stolid brick presence, its implication of order and consequence. You do what the judge said. You set boundaries with your family. You prove that Elsie comes first, not just in words, in actions. They're going to hate me. Maybe. Or maybe they'll learn to respect you for protecting your child. My mom is facing jail time because of this. Your mom is facing jail time because she abandoned a child. I didn't do that to her. She did that to herself. I know. He sounded tired, defeated. I know, okay? I know she was wrong. I know I was wrong to defend her. I just don't know how to fix any of it. You start by accepting what happened without excuses. You start by telling your family that what your mother did was criminal, and you won't minimize it. You start by showing Elsie that her safety matters more than anyone's comfort. And if I do all that, then maybe in 6 months, things can change. But it has to be real, Evan. Not just words. Okay. A long pause. Tell Elsie I love her. You can tell her yourself on Saturday. You have supervised visitation. Right. Yeah. Another pause. Tamsin, I'm sorry. For all of it. She wanted to accept that apology. Wanted to believe it meant something. But apologies without change were just words. Show me, she said. Then ended the call. The criminal case against Maribel moved forward parallel to the custody proceedings. Tamsin gave a deposition. Elsie gave a deposition with a child advocate present. Gwen gave hers. The evidence compiled like sediment, layer upon layer of facts building into something undeniable. Maribel pled not guilty, hired a defense attorney who argued that she'd had a mental health crisis, that she'd panicked, that she'd made a terrible mistake but hadn't intended harm. The prosecutor presented the note, the timestamps showing when Maribel left and when Elsie was found, the empty refrigerator, the locked doors, the absence of any attempt to notify anyone that a child was alone. This wasn't panic, the prosecutor said during the preliminary hearing that Tamsin attended. This was calculated abandonment. She packed a bag. She locked the doors. She left a note. Those are not the actions of someone experiencing a mental health crisis. Those are the actions of someone choosing their own convenience over a child's life. The judge agreed, bound the case over for trial. Maribel's attorney pushed for a plea deal, reduced charges in exchange for admission of guilt. The prosecutor refused. She wrote that the child ruins everything. The prosecutor told Patricia, who relayed it to Tamsin. She showed no remorse in her statements. She minimized the danger. This goes to trial. The trial date was set for March 15th. In the meantime, Tamsin and Elsie built a life. Small and quiet and normal. School and homework and weekend trips to the library. Supervised visits with Evan that were awkward at first, but gradually became easier. He was trying. Tamsin could see that. Whether he was trying hard enough remained to be seen. One evening in late February, Elsie asked about the trial. "Will I have to go?" she asked. They were making dinner together, spaghetti with sauce from a jar, garlic bread from the freezer. Nothing fancy but theirs. "You might have to testify," Tamsin said carefully. The prosecutor said she'd try to avoid it, but it depends on what the defense argues. "What would I have to say?" "Just tell the truth about what happened. What you remember." Elsie stirred the sauce. Steam rose, fogging her glasses. She'd started wearing them last month. Made her look older. "Will Grandma be there?" "Yes." "Will she be mad at me?" Tamsin set down the spoon she was holding, turned Elsie to face her. "Baby, listen to me. Grandma made her own choices. You didn't make her do anything. You being honest about what happened isn't mean or vindictive or wrong. It's just truth." "But she'll think I'm telling on her." "You're not telling on her. You're telling what happened to you. There's a difference." "It doesn't feel different." "I know." Tamsin touched her daughter's cheek. "But that's because you're a good person with empathy, even for people who don't deserve it. That's not a weakness. That's strength." Elsie nodded, but didn't look convinced. The trial began on March 15th under gray skies that threatened rain. Tamsin arranged for Elsie to stay with a friend that day, just in case. She sat in the courtroom with Patricia and watched as Maribel was led in, wearing a blue dress that looked church-appropriate, her hair styled carefully, her expression placid. She didn't look at Tamsin. The prosecution opened with facts. The timeline, the note, the neighbor testimony. Gwen described finding Elsie on her doorstep, the child's thin pajamas, the cold. A detective described the scene, the locked doors, the empty refrigerator, the signs of hasty departure. This wasn't an accident, the prosecutor said. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was abandonment. Deliberate, calculated, and documented in the defendant's own handwriting. The defense attorney, a woman named Helen Rodriguez, who spoke softly but firmly, presented a different narrative. Maribel Rowe is a woman who dedicated her life to raising children. 3 of her own, countless grandchildren. She has no history of abuse or neglect. On December 24th, she was overwhelmed. She was dealing with health issues, financial stress, family pressure. She made a terrible decision. But one bad decision does not erase decades of care. Then explain the note, the prosecutor said during cross-examination of a character witness. Explain why she wrote that a child ruins everything if she cares so deeply about children. The witness, Maribel's sister, Deborah, hesitated. She was frustrated. People say things when they're frustrated, and then act on those frustrations by leaving a child alone overnight. She didn't think she'd be gone that long. She packed a suitcase. She drove 3 hours away. She turned off her phone. That suggests she planned to be gone quite a while. Deborah had no answer for that. On the second day, the prosecutor called Gwen Holloway. She testified cleanly, without emotion, just facts. Described Elsie's appearance, her demeanor, what she'd said. Described the hours she'd tried to reach Tamsin. Described putting a strange child to bed in her guest room on Christmas Eve because the alternative was sending her back to an empty house. She was cold, Gwen said, and scared, but trying not to show it. You could see her trying to be brave. Did she say anything about her grandmother? She said her grandmother needed quiet time. She said she was trying to be good. She said Gwen's voice caught. She said maybe if she was quieter, she wouldn't ruin things. The courtroom was silent. Tamsin watched Maribel's face, watched for any crack in her composed expression. Saw none. The prosecution rested on day 3. The defense called its witnesses, family members who described Maribel as devoted, hardworking, stressed but loving. A doctor who testified about her anxiety diagnosis, her prescription medications, the strain of caregiving. None of that, the prosecutor said in closing arguments, excuses what she did. Plenty of grandparents feel stressed. Plenty of people struggle with mental health. They don't lock children out of houses on Christmas Eve. They don't write notes calling children burdens. They don't abandon them. The defense countered. This was a moment of poor judgment in a lifetime of good ones. This was a woman at her breaking point who made a mistake. Punishment should be proportional. Rehabilitation should be the goal. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Tamsin sat in the hallway with Patricia and waited, watched other cases cycle through, watched lawyers and defendants and families move through their own crises and consequences. At 4 p.m. they were called back. The jury filed in. 12 faces, carefully neutral. The 4 women stood. In the matter of the state versus Maribel Rowe, on the count of child endangerment, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of abandonment of a dependent, how do you find? Guilty. Maribel's face finally changed. Paled. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. She shook it off. Judge Morrison, the same judge from the custody hearing, set sentencing for April 8th. Maribel was released on bond, pending sentencing. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Small-town news, but news nonetheless. Tamsin declined to comment, walked to her car, sat in the driver's seat and let herself feel it. Not triumph, not vindication, just the weight of something finished. The weeks between the verdict and sentencing passed quietly. Spring began to assert itself. Crocuses pushing through thawing ground, days stretching longer, the smell of wet earth replacing winter's harsh bite. Elsie had a good week at school. Brought home an A on a science project. Made a new friend. Laughed at dinner for the first time in months. Really laughed, the kind that comes from the belly and feels like release. Tamsin noticed. Catalogued it. Held onto it like proof that children could heal. that damage wasn't always permanent, that choosing the hard right thing over the easy wrong thing mattered. Evan's supervised visits continued. He showed up on time, came prepared with activities, asked about school, listened. The supervisor's reports were positive. Patricia mentioned that he'd enrolled in parenting classes, that his family had been conspicuously absent from the courthouse. "He's trying," Patricia said over coffee one afternoon. "I'll give him that." "Is trying enough?" Tamsin asked. "Sometimes. Maybe. Ask me in 6 months." The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Tamsin woke early, dressed carefully, professional but not formal, present but not performative. This wasn't about her. This was about consequences. This was about a legal system functioning the way it should, protecting the vulnerable, holding the powerful accountable. She drove to the courthouse through morning light that turned everything gold and soft. Misleading weather, pretty lies about ugly truths. The courtroom filled slowly. Maribel's family took up 2 rows: Deborah, Evan's brothers and their wives, cousins, friends. They looked at Tamsin with expressions ranging from anger to pity. She looked back without flinching. Evan sat alone, 3 rows behind his family, separated but present. He nodded at Tamsin when she entered. She nodded back. Maribel entered with her lawyer. She'd lost weight. Her clothes hung looser. Her face had aged in the weeks since the trial, new lines around her mouth, darkness under her eyes. She sat straight-backed, chin up, maintaining the dignity that had always been her shield. Judge Morrison entered. Everyone stood. Saturday, the ritual of law proceeding with its ancient gravity. This is the sentencing hearing for Maribel Rowe, convicted of child endangerment and abandonment of a dependent. Ms. Rodriguez, does your client wish to make a statement? Helen Rodriguez stood. She does, Your Honor. Maribel rose, approached the podium. Her hands gripped the sides until her knuckles went white. I want to say. She stopped, started again. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I was overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking clearly. I should have asked for help. Judge Morrison waited. Is that all? I never meant to hurt anyone, especially not Elsie. She's my granddaughter. I love her. Ms. Rowe, during the trial, we heard testimony about what you wrote, about how your granddaughter ruins everything. How do you reconcile that with claiming to love her? Maribel's composure cracked slightly. I was frustrated. People say things they don't mean, and then act on those things by abandoning a child overnight. I thought someone would come. Who? Who did you think would come? You left no note for anyone except the child herself. You turned off your phone. You drove 3 hours away. You created a situation where a young girl had to save herself because no adult would. Maribel stopped. Her lawyer touched her arm. She shook her head. I have no excuse. No, Judge Morrison agreed. You don't. Sit down. Maribel returned to her seat. Her family looked stricken. Evan stared at the floor. The prosecution wishes to be heard regarding sentencing. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, this case represents a fundamental failure of an adult's duty to protect a child. The defendant showed no remorse initially, minimized her actions consistently, and only acknowledged wrongdoing when faced with criminal consequences. We ask for the maximum sentence allowed under state guidelines. Ms. Rodriguez. Your Honor, Mrs. Rowe is a first-time offender in her 60s with no prior criminal history. She has been a productive member of this community for decades. She made one terrible decision. Rehabilitation is possible. We ask for leniency, suspended sentence, probation, community service. Mr. Prosecutor, the maximum sentence for these combined charges is 18 months, Your Honor. Ms. Rodriguez, you're asking for no jail time at all. Given the circumstances, Your Honor, yes. Incarceration serves no rehabilitative purpose here. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Tamsin watched her review the case file, watched her think. The courtroom held its collective breath. "Here is what concerns me most about this case," Judge Morrison said finally. "It's not just that a child was endangered. It's the complete absence of empathy in the defendant's response. She wrote, in her own hand, that this child ruins everything. She viewed an 11-year-old as a burden to be discarded. And when confronted with the harm she caused, her first response was not remorse, but defensiveness. She looked directly at Maribel. Ms. Rowe, you are 63 years old. You raised 3 children. You are not ignorant of what children need: safety, food, supervision, warmth, care. You chose to withhold all of those things from your granddaughter on Christmas Eve. That choice was deliberate. The note proves it." Maribel stared back, said nothing. "However, I also recognize that incarceration is not the only form of justice. Sometimes accountability looks like restrictions. Sometimes it looks like supervised participation in a child's life, if and when that child and her guardian choose to allow it. Sometimes it looks like public acknowledgement of wrongdoing." Judge Morrison paused. "Maribel Rowe, you are hereby sentenced to 12 months in county jail, with 6 months suspended. You will serve 6 months. Following your release, you will be on probation for 3 years. During that time, you will have no unsupervised contact with any minor children. You will complete a parenting education program. You will perform 200 hours of community service focused on child welfare. You will write a letter of apology to your granddaughter, though whether she chooses to read it is entirely her decision." Maribel swayed slightly. Her lawyer studied her. "Do you understand the sentence?" "Yes, Your Honor." Maribel's voice was barely audible. "You will report to the county jail by 5 p.m. today to begin serving your sentence. Do you have any questions?" "No, Your Honor." "Then we're adjourned." The gavel came down. Final. Binding. Done. Maribel's family erupted in quiet chaos. Tears, embraces, angry whispers. Evan sat motionless, watching his mother be led away by the bailiff. She didn't look back at him, didn't look back at anyone. Tamsin stood, walked out without speaking to anyone, made it to her car before her hands started shaking. Not from fear, not from satisfaction, from the sheer weight of having seen something through to its end, having protected her daughter at the cost of burning every bridge to a family that had never really been hers anyway. She sat in her car and let herself feel it all. The anger, the grief, the bone-deep exhaustion of fighting, the relief of winning, the knowledge that winning felt hollow because it shouldn't have been necessary in the first place. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elsie, sent from her friend's mom's phone. How did it go? Tamsin typed back, "It's over. She has to go to jail for 6 months." A pause. Then, "Is that good?" Tamsin stared the question, thought about all the ways to answer it, settled on truth. "It's fair." Another pause. "Okay. See you tonight?" "See you tonight. Love you." "Love you too." Tamsin put her phone down, started her car, drove home through a town that looked the same as it always had. Brick buildings, church steeples, people going about their lives. No one knew what had just happened in that courtroom. No one cared except the handful of people directly involved. That was okay. Justice didn't need to be public to matter. She stopped at the grocery store, bought ingredients for Elsie's favorite meal, chicken tacos with all the toppings, fresh fruit, that particular brand of cookies she liked. Small acts of normalcy. Small promises that life would continue, would get better, would be more than just surviving. At home, she cleaned the apartment even though it was already clean. Put fresh sheets on both beds. Open windows to let in spring air. Set the table for 2 with actual cloth napkins because some days deserved small ceremonies. Elsie came home at 6, driven by her friend's mother, who waved and drove off before Tamsin could thank her. Elsie dropped her backpack in the hallway, looked around, took in the clean apartment, the set table, the smell of cooking. "It really is over?" she asked. "It really is. And I don't have to see her?" "Not unless you want to. Not until you're ready. Maybe never." Elsie nodded slowly. "What about Dad?" "What about him?" "Is he mad?" "I don't know. We'll find out on Saturday during your visit." "Do I still have to go?" Tamsin knelt down, met her daughter's eyes. "Do you want to?" Elsie thought about it. "Yeah, I think so. He's trying." "Then you'll go. And if at any point you don't want to, you tell me and we'll figure it out." "Okay." They ate dinner together at the table with the cloth napkins, talked about school, about Elsie's science project being chosen for the district fair, about the movie they might see over the weekend. Normal things. Good things. The kind of evening that felt earned. After dinner, they sat on the couch with hot chocolate, made properly with milk on the stove and real cocoa powder, the way Elsie liked it. The small Christmas tree still stood in the corner, lights unplugged now, ornaments catching the lamplight. "Should we take that down?" Elsie asked. "Probably. It's almost April. Can we leave it up a little longer?" Tamsin looked at her daughter, saw what she wasn't saying, that the tree represented something now, something more than just a holiday. It represented survival. It represented proof that they'd made their own Christmas, their own family, their own safety. "We can leave it up as long as you want," Tamsin said. Elsie smiled. First real smile in months. "Thanks, Mom." That night, after Elsie was asleep, Tamsin sat in the quiet living room and thought about forgiveness, about whether it was something she owed to anyone, whether it was something that would ever feel possible, whether its absence made her hard or made her honest. She decided it didn't matter. Forgiveness was a luxury afforded to people who hadn't had to climb through bathroom windows in their pajamas. Forgiveness was for situations that were accidental, misguided, understandable. This was none of those things. This was intentional harm. This was calculated abandonment. This was an adult deciding a child was too inconvenient to tolerate. Tamsin would not forgive that, would not soften it, would not let time or pressure or family expectations convince her that protecting her daughter made her the villain in someone else's story. She locked the front door, checked it twice, turned off the lights. In her daughter's room, Elsie slept peacefully, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, her breathing soft and even. Safe. Tamsin stood in the doorway and watched her sleep and made a promise. Silently, fiercely, without doubt. No one would ever make her daughter feel like a burden again. No one would ever choose convenience over her safety. No one would ever leave her behind. Not while Tamsin was alive. Not while she had any power to prevent it. She closed the door softly, went to her own room, lay down in the dark and let exhaustion pull her under. Outside, Maple Crossing settled into night. The town that looked so perfect from a distance. The town where cruelty hid behind holiday decorations and family names. But inside this small apartment, there was something different. Something the town couldn't touch or diminish or explain away. There was safety. There was choice. There was a mother who had refused to let her child be forgotten. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything.